So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first European GPP Helpdesk webinar of 2017, which will be focused on textile products and services, especially regarding the release of the new European GPP criteria for this product group. My name is Estela Grana. I work as Sustainable Procurement Officer at ICLE, and as you may know, ICLE runs the European GPP Helpdesk on behalf of the European Commission, which includes, among others, the organization of 2 webinars every year. This is the first of the 2. The publication of a monthly newsletter with relevant information on GPP, and the delivery of a Helpdesk service answering the questions and the queries you may have on aspects related to green public procurement. In our panel today for the webinar, we have 3 speakers, starting with Robert Kaukevich from the European Commission, who's responsible for the GPP work from DG Environment. And he will be giving us a short introduction about the criteria and about the development work for the criteria, and I think also some of the tools available that are available regarding GPP. After this introduction, we will have Nicholas Dodd, who works at the Joint Research Center. This is the responsible body for the criteria development work, and he will be explaining us the criteria more in depth. And finally, we will have Barbara van Offenbeck from the Dutch Ministry for Infrastructure and the Environment, who will bring us from the theory to the actual implementation, and will show us an example of a procurement procedure using innovative criteria in the field of textiles. This webinar is organized with the intention of explaining the new criteria and clarifying any potential issues or questions that you might have. So please, there will be time for questions after the presentations of each panelist. I would like to encourage you to send your questions to the host, to ICLE Europe web conference. You can see this account at the panelist panel, and please send them your questions, and my colleague Amalia Ochoa will make sure that we and the panelists get all your questions, and we try to give them an answer. And if you have any technical difficulties, please also let ICLE Europe web conference account know, and Amalia will make sure that that you find a solution for them. So now we'll hand over to Robert Kaukevich from DG Environment, who will be, as said, giving us an introduction about the GPP criteria development work. Robert, I'm going to pass you the presenter role. And you should be able to speak now. It's all yours. Robert? We seem to be having some technical issues. As we know, sometimes technology does not work as we intend to. I'm going to try to connect with Robert. Robert, can you hear us?
Yes. Hello, I can hear you, but can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can.
Okay.
It's all yours.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Thanks to Estela and to ICLE for organizing this webinar, with which we mainly want to present the new GPP criteria for textiles, and the main work for this will be done by Nicholas Dodd from JRC, who has also done, together with his colleagues, the main work to develop these criteria. So I will not steal any thunder from you, but want to give a short introduction to the work we're doing on GPP. I suppose that this is well known to a lot of people in this webinar, so please bear with the repetition. But I want to underline that there are more things that we're doing than only developing the textiles criteria, but I will be very quick, just going back to what is our policy, overall policy background, our communication from 2008, where we started to support public authorities throughout Europe to green their purchasing. We set a political target back then of 15% of tendering procedures that should be green. We started developing EU GPP criteria for priority products and services. We put in place legal and operational guidance and asked the member states who hadn't done it back then to regularly make GPP national action plans, and the vast majority of them have them now in place. Here on one slide, all the things that you can find on our webpage, the GPP criteria, which are usually translated in more than 20 languages. the still rather new Buying Green Guide, explaining on how you can do green procurement under the new legislation, the Public Procurement Directive from 2014, which should have been implemented by the member states by now, but some of them are still late. We have a lot of good practice examples on our webpage from all kinds of different areas of green procurement. And there is the help desk. If you have any questions in English, French, or German, you can send them to the help desk. I think you can even do it in Spanish. There are a couple of Spanish speeches over there. Then, hold on. I'm trying to push to the next slide, but that's not working. Ah, yes, so here we are. Here is the product groups which we are developing on the first slide. The ones in red are the fairly new ones. The brand new ones are the one on textiles we're talking about today, from published earlier this month. Here also the roads criteria are still pretty new from last year. Others are in the course of revision. These are the ones we are working on at the moment: street lighting, food and catering, cleaning services, furniture, transport, paints and varnishes, and data centers. A very quick overlook of the criteria development process. It's a very resource-intense process where we work with a lot of stakeholders coming from procurement offices, but also NGOs and businesses who provide their input to make these criteria as usable and ambitious as possible. We have two levels of criteria: core and comprehensive, light green or dark green if you want so. And we are basing our criteria to a very large extent to the EU Ecolabel in this context, where we have Ecolabel criteria for textiles. The member states and contracting authorities are usually looking at our criteria, but then they might take them entirely up, but often they are also adapting them to their national context. Our overall work, of course, also GPP is working more and more to shift from a linear economy to a circular economy. We're having a big event on the 29th of October in Tallinn, a circular procurement event that we are organizing together with the Dutch government and the Estonian presidency and ICLEI. So if you're interested in joining, I can send more information about this. In the Circular Economy Action Plan, we have a couple of elements which are related to green public procurement. We committed to include more circularity requirements in the GPP criteria. We have already a couple of them in the textile criteria now. We want to support a greater uptake of GPP. We will be launching some trainings next year. And the Commission boldly committed to lead by example in our own procurement, but also in the reinforcing of the use of GPP in EU funding. We have some good progress in some areas, but still there's a long way to go in others. Here's some examples of what you can do in GPP criteria with circularity. You can promote longer lifetime of products, for example, laptops and batteries, but also in textiles. We heard about that more later. We set requirements for the easy dismantling of certain devices, for example, monitors, easy repair of furniture, but also textiles, and the requirements of recycled materials in construction. As I mentioned, we want to support a higher uptake of GPP, not only via training, but we also set into place the possibility of technical assistance. So if public authorities want to learn more about GPP, they can go via our peer-to-peer learning. That's a fund which is run by the colleagues in DG Regio. That's rather unbureaucratic, but it must come, the demand must come from a member state saying, okay, I want to learn more about green public procurement, and then you can be teamed up with other people who have quite a lot of experience in that area. And with this, I'm at the end. These are the contact details of Enrico, my colleague who's working with me on green public procurement, and myself, so please don't hesitate to send me any questions. Thanks a lot.
Hi, Robert. Thanks very much for your introduction to the criteria and the ones that are ongoing in their development. I would like to ask you if you can remind our audience how can they get engaged in the criteria development work?
I think that's maybe even better a question to answer to Nick, because he can explain the technicalities. of this, how you exactly sign up to this, I think I better leave it for Nick.
Okay, so I'll keep it up for later. Or Nicolas, we haven't introduced you yet, but would you like to answer that question?
Hi there. Good afternoon, Estella. Hi, Robert. Yeah, basically, the JRC, a product bureau that runs the criteria development process, has a web page, and for each product, we have a separate web page where you can basically sign up as a stakeholder to follow the criteria development or revision process. So basically, you need to direct yourself to the relevant product web page for JRC.
Okay, thank you.
I think sometimes there's a cross-link from the DG Environment web page, which states that there's a criteria development process underway.
Okay, very good. We'll put the link later. My colleague Amalia will place the link of the criteria development work in the chat. In the meantime, we got a question from the audience and says, is protective apparel included in the procedure for textile GPP? Well, I think this question will be for Nick, who will be introducing us to the textile criteria in depth. So if it's okay for the queries, we'll keep it for the next round. Okay, so if there are no further questions, thank you, Robert. I'll hand it over to Nicolas Dodd from the Joint Research Center. You've heard him shortly answer the question, but now he will be guiding us through the main aspects of the new criteria. So, Nick, your turn.
Great, thank you. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to...
The presentable, sorry.
Okay,
so you can move through the slides.
Let's check that's working. Yeah, that seems to be working great. Okay, so I'm going to run through and present an overview of the revised set of EU GPP criteria for textiles. I'll both highlight in terms of the kind of rationale for the revision, and also try and highlight where we've got new areas of criteria for the first time as well, or where we've updated certain criteria from the last criteria set. So basically, yeah, I'll just cover on the scope some of the environmental aspects that are addressed. Briefly on the procurement options and contract types that we address. The criteria areas are now split for the first time into products and services. So I'll run through and highlight the distinct differences between those and the types of criteria under them, and then briefly touch at the end on whole life costs as well. So in terms of the scope definition for the criteria, certainly for products, we focus on mainly on clothing and accessories, and under that we have uniforms, workwear, personal protective equipment, which I think responds to the first question, and as well as accessories consisting of at least 80% by weight of textiles, whether they be in a woven, non-woven or knitted form. And also interior textiles, again consisting of at least 80% by weight of textile fibers in the various forms. This could be bed linen, towels, table linen, curtains that might be present in a range of used in a range of public service contexts. We note in the criteria that obviously there are a lot of safety requirements, legal requirements around clothing and protective equipment in particular, and these should always take precedence over these environmental criteria, so we make that clear in the document. Just to note the types of fibers, just at the bottom of the slide there, strong focus on cotton, also wool, also polyamide, otherwise known as nylon, and also polyester. These are the predominant fibers we see in public contracts. And increasing interest in man-made cellulose fibers, viscose type fibers, some other types including lyocell and modal. So just looking at products, these are the main environmental areas, main environmental aspects that are addressed. Quite a diverse range of impacts from textiles, but we're trying to have an impact on, try and reduce the impacts of hazardous substances on the aquatic environment, whether they be fertilizers, pesticides from growing fibers, or those released into the environment from textile manufacturing sites. The use of biotic and abiotic resources, whether that's wood, oil-based products to make fibers, or natural gas. Various emissions from production sites, and also from the washing, drying, and ironing of textiles, where a lot of energy is used, and this leads to emissions to the environment as well. And then also the possibility, as Robert has touched upon, for a more circular economy, in which we actually conserve resources and put them to work for longer. So we try and address early product failure. Now, in terms of what does that mean in terms of the GPP approach, yeah, it's fibers with reduced use of fertilizers, reduced use of hazardous substances in production, potential for recycled content, potential to reduce energy used for drying and ironing, and also specifications for longer-lasting color-fast, more durable fabrics, longer-lasting functional coatings. If I move to Textile Services, this is a new area within the scope of textile criteria, and from our research, services can offer environmental life cycle, environmental and cost benefits compared to the purchase of textile products. We specify criteria that touch upon the kind of laundry, the collection, the cleaning, and then returning of textiles. In particular, this can use a lot of energy, but also detergent. The maintenance of textiles to increase and extend their lifespan, and also their take-back of textiles at the end of their life or the end of their first service life by segregating, collecting, and sorting them for either recycling or for reuse. Similar range of impacts for textiles related to textile services that we're trying to act on, but in particular trying to reduce the energy associated with washing, drying, and ironing, and trying to extend the lifetime, possibly having a second lifetime of reuse for the textiles. So I'll go into the criteria. They're structured as ever divided into core, the most accessible set of criteria, and comprehensive, more challenging criteria for those who want to go further to address aspects of environmental performance. And then these four types, split into four types of broad criteria: the selection criteria for the to assess the suitability of an economic operator, technical specifications as minimum compliance, awards to provide an objective and specific basis for distinguishing between tenders, and contract performances to specify how a contract must be carried out. So this is the broad structure of the criteria document. I'll look at textile products first. The fiber criteria we start with. So just the subject matter, purchase of textile products with reduced environmental impact. We kept that quite simple. Selection criteria for products, focusing on two aspects. One is on the tenderer's ability to kind of trace the origin of a fiber and its particular, how it was produced or grown, and also chemical management systems, information on the actual production sites and how they manage chemicals and minimize the impacts on the environment. Into the technical specifications, the main criteria there on cotton is encouraging two types of cotton growing that has a reduced impact on the environment and can reduce fertilizer and pesticide use. The first is integrated pesticide management, which is an improved production system, and then organic production. And we've included both of those in the technical specification on the core with a 20% threshold, minimum threshold, and on the comprehensive 60% minimum, either IPM or organic content. And we think that 20% works on the core because IPM is greater availability of this IPM improved cotton production on the market. There's an explanatory note on supporting the market for organic cotton in particular, and we've given some notes there on how to support the market even if there's not so much actually certified cotton available. There's an award criteria with suggesting a point for 10% increments upon the minimum of 20 or 60. Okay, then we have some criteria addressing wool, suggested to be used where there's a minimum, where there's more than 50% content of wool. The wool criteria focuses on the cleaning of the wool, which can then release a lot of pollution into the aquatic environment, and so there's target threshold for the treatment of the wastewater from the cleaning plant. And then for man-made cellulose fiber, this is viscose, for example, we have criteria on sulfur emissions from the production plant and also halogenated emissions from the production of pulp prior to spinning the fiber. Then moving on to polyester fibers, the main focus here is on recycled content. We think this is more challenging, so we've had this under comprehensive criteria with a minimum technical specification of 20% polyester recycled content. Although we note in the criteria that there can be technical barriers depending on the technical specification, the performance requirements for the particularly for protective equipment. Moving on to award criteria on fiber, we then suggest that above and beyond the 20% minimum recycled content for polyester, and potentially also for nylon, there could be a 10% increments from which point against which points are given. And then we've also got an award criteria that would reward tenderers who can show that the use of polyester, the polyester fabric can be easily separated from the product, and also where the tenderer provides a somehow voluntary take back of the polyester material for recycling. Okay, just moving on to, we have a set of a focus on the use of chemicals at production sites. The first technical specification here focuses at a simple level, asking for a declaration of whether those substances of very high concern from the European REACH candidate list. Then we moved into some more detail with the technical specification, which is based on testing of product for the presence of certain chemicals of concern. Some of these are carried from the last criteria, presence of azo dyes, formaldehyde, and also plasticizers associated with coatings, laminates, and membranes. And then we have a new set of substances to test for that are auxiliaries. These are used at different production sites to help with the chemical processes. We then have a slightly more challenging award criteria, and this is a set of chemical requirements that, from our research, can only really be verified at the production site. So this is more difficult. It requires an actual audit and verification at that site, and checking and verifying the actual chemical formulations and ingredients used in the different processes. So we have some are carried from the Lustra criteria, and then we have new focus on a list of auxiliaries, bleaching agents used, and then also we touch upon waterproof, certain types of long-chain fluoropolymers in water repellent treatments, waterproof membranes, and also the use of certain flame retardants. And then we have certain criteria that are trying to focus on moving towards circular economy. The first technical specifications are a set of durability standards, focusing on durability and lifespan extension. Quite a number of these are carried from the last revision, the ones on dimensional change and also color fastness. But we've introduced some new criteria on tensile strength, how strong the fibers are, and also seam strength, how strongly the joins of the fabric panels are, how resistant they are. We also have tests for how long the water, dirt, or stain repellent will last for under simulated real-life conditions, and also how long a flame retardant treatment may last for. And in the case of the latter, if the fiber itself is inherently water repellent or it has inherent flame retardant properties, this is also rewarded potentially. We also have a technical specification on the availability of parts and accessories to maintain and repair a textile product, particularly workwear, with a suggested 2-year availability of the relevant parts and accessories. It could be zips, buttons, fixtures, and to ask tenderers to provide an indicative price list. And then moving on to award criteria, where these focus on design for reuse and recycling. And we think that particularly we found in our research that there's scope for designing garments, workwear, for ease of removal or overprinting of logos and identifiers from the public organisation. We then have focus on energy conservation during use, and two technical specifications. The first is actually selecting the fabric. It could be a fiber blend in the fabric to minimize energy use for drying and ironing. And we have requirements on moisture retention, which would be an indicator of how much spinning energy is needed to dry it, to kind of drive out the water from the fabric. And also fabric smoothness grading, which is an indicator of how much ironing would be needed, for example, for a shirt as part of a workwear set. And then also care labeling, if possible, with the care labeling to try and encourage lower washing temperatures to be used. For example, if the garments are, if workers are encouraged to clean the garments at home using a domestic washing machine. Move on to this here to textile services. Here we have a focus on the laundry, through which the textiles, whether they be workwear or sheets, for example, or towels, would pass. We have selection criteria on the capabilities of the tender or the provider of the services to actually manage a range of possible aspects of the service that could lead to environmental improvements. At the core level, simply on the maintenance and repair of the fabrics to extend their life, and at the comprehensive level, a package of laundry services, particularly with energy as a concern, maintenance, and then take back at the end of the service life of the textiles. So basically looking at their capabilities and their track record in those areas. We then have a technical specification. This is focused on laundry operation, on fabric selection to minimize energy use for drying and ironing. This is the same as for the products criteria, which I have already mentioned. And then an award criteria on the operation of the laundry service, with the first criteria on the energy consumption of the laundry in kilowatt hours based on the throughput of washing. And then the second is on the actual detergent itself that's used, with rewarding those who use an eco-labeled detergent with reference to the EU Eco-Label Criteria or equivalent. And then we have a contract performance clause on the laundry to actually sort of monitor the energy use of the laundry over time upon award of the contract and operation of the contract. Then as part of the service, we also have maintenance and take-back criteria. We have a technical specification on how the textile asset will be maintained, providing basic repairs, fabric panel replacement, retreating and proofing of for example, on water repellent or flame retardant fabrics. And then a take-back system. We thought this was more challenging, not so prevalent in the market at the moment. So it's a comprehensive technical specification with some points about how the system could be operated in terms of collection, training and guidance for people to actually segregate the textiles to be taken away, and then post-collection sorting activities, and then a related contract performance clause. Okay, that's the service criteria, both the product and service criteria. And just on the last slide here, we just, and this is also in the criteria document, we just wanted to highlight those areas where we can also achieve reductions in the life cycle cost of having a textile product, and also through services as well. So in terms of operating a laundry, it's possible to reduce substantially energy costs associated with washing, drying and ironing a textile, both from a point of view of specifying the product, but also, as I mentioned, from how you actually procure a laundry service. And in terms of lifespan of textiles, there are many factors that can influence the lifespan of a textile product, but it is possible to, through specification, to have textiles that are more resistant to wear and early failure, and also to focus on provision of proper care and maintenance to extend the technical lifespan of the textile. And then the last point here, in terms of the end of life of the textile, clearly, the cost of disposing of textiles is a cost burden. They can be they are a product that weighs a lot as well. So in terms of paying by weight for disposal, this is an issue. But there are active steps that can be taken to increase the value of end-of-life textiles through segregation of them into different fibers, different types of fabric, different types of textiles that could be recycled or reused, and other things through careful consideration of, for example, design for easy removal or overprinting of logos. Okay, just the very last slide, just to summarize. Using these criteria to drive environmental performance can address a wide variety of the impacts from common textile fibers, verification of chemical management using product testing and or product site auditing, a new focus on circular economy aspects, opportunities for resource efficiency, for durability, reuse and recycling. We have a new focus on textile services, particularly looking at maintenance, laundry and end of life. And there is certainly potential for more informed life cycle cost management of textile ownership and end of life. And at that point, that was the last slide from me.
Very good. Thank you very much, Nick, for your presentation. I think it's always very interesting to hear the explanation of the criteria from the team developing them. But I think it's even more interesting to have the possibility to ask you questions. And that's, I would like to encourage the audience, and we have been getting a few questions during the presentation, but please, if you would like to ask Nicholas something about the criteria, it's your opportunity. I would like to start with a question of my own, which is, well, as you know, the greatest fear of a procurer is actually, well, including some criteria that makes competition more difficult, and that results in a procurement not being able to be awarded or getting no responses. So my question would be, while you're developing the criteria, have you engaged with suppliers and with manufacturers, and what has been the response regarding the criteria proposal?
Yes, along the criteria process, we engage with a wide range of different stakeholders along the supply chain. And I think you can see that in the criteria, because under certain criteria we've made a note where there might be any kind of clash between technical requirements in the market or the availability of a particular specification. We've made a note in the criteria, or we've provided some short guidance on that. So a lot of practical issues do come out and are communicated to us during the criteria development process. And we hopefully reflect those in the criteria document itself.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to pass to the questions that we've received during the presentation. One of them is, well, first, if shoes are part of the scope of this criteria. Nick?
Sorry, can you just repeat the question?
Yes, whether shoes are part of the scope of the criteria. That's the first question.
Okay. No, they're not within the scope of this criteria set.
Okay. What about workwear and protective equipment like fiber suits made of aramid fibers?
Yes, definitely within the scope. Yes.
Okay. Well, the question includes, are they under this regulation? I would like to remind you, this is not a regulation. This is just voluntary GPP criteria, which well, should be a guide for you to use them, but it's not they're not mandatory. We have a question from Emil Bruls that asks, the technical specifications for cotton are confusing on the percentage of organic or EPM cotton. Why is recycled cotton not mentioned as an even better fiber? And she adds, in made by environmental benchmark for textile fibers. Conventional cotton is classified as Class E, organic and cotton in conversion as Class B, while recycled cotton is Class A. So the question is, why is recycled cotton not mentioned as an even better fiber?
Well, with this set of criteria, we wanted to make them as widely accessible as possible across Europe, and the most the sort of most commonly available, sort of most widely available specifications, and those with a significant environmental improvement potential, was this combination of IPM and organic production at this point in time. Now, that's not to say that in the future a recycled cotton specification might be something that could be looked at, but I think at the moment we felt from during the revision process that this was the most appropriate to focus on.
Okay, thank you. We have another question that says, does polyamide cover only nylon?
Yes, at the moment it's focused on nylon. Yes, they're one and the same. Yes.
Okay. And we have a last question, which says, well, recycling is something different than reusing. You seem to focus in the criteria on the reuse. Is that right?
In the criteria, we focus on recycled. We have recycled content. We don't specifically. We only touch on reuse in the sense of end-of-life management. So sort of separating out at the end of a first service life to have a potential further service life and reuse. So it's in that set of criteria that we look on reuse. Did that answer that question? Hi, Estella, can't hear you.
Hi, Nick.
Oh, hi there.
Yeah, sorry, I think you lost me. It seems that the question has been answered properly, or that's the answer from our querist. So, well, I think that's pretty much it so far. We haven't had any further questions. So I will hand it over now to Barbara van Offenbeck, who works at the Dutch Ministry for Infrastructure and the Environment. And she's going to introduce us to her experience using textile criteria in the procurement of textile products. So Barbara, I'm going to pass you the presenter ball once again.
Yes.
Yes, there you are.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for this opportunity to join this this webinar. In this part of the webinar, I'll briefly compare the new criteria of the European Commission with the ones we use in the Netherlands for textiles. After that, I'll give an explanation. One moment, I was with my slide going forward. I seem to have problems with my slides here now. Oh, over there. Yes, there's the agenda. What I wanted to do is give a small comparison between the new criteria of the European Commission with the ones we use here in Holland. After that, I'll give an explanation of how we organize our public procurement and give some examples of pilots we ran to test and stimulate innovative circular solutions. At the end of this webinar, I'll explain just shortly how we work on circularity of textiles in Europe in the European Clothing Action Plan, which is a very interesting project which is running in Europe. One moment, I'm not sure, yeah. So starting with the reflection of these new European GPP criteria, when I read them, I was really very enthusiastic about them. because I really think that they can mean a step forwards to sustainable and circular textile in Europe. And as far as I'm concerned, it would be really great if national governments would start to use them, and, for example, use the basic criteria as a minimal criteria. What I also think they're very practical and easy to use. I think for me they were very clear actually. So I would like to give my compliments to the composers of the criteria. So Nicholas, a very warm welcome to these criteria. When I compare these criteria with the ones we use in the Netherlands, there are a lot of similarities. Themes are more or less the same. Sometimes we use other categories or descriptions, and for example, the shoes is within our scope in the criteria instead of in these criteria. But in the main, overall, they really are very similar. In our experience in using minimal criteria in combination with rewarding better or more sustainable solutions is also very positive, and we saw that it really helps developing a sustainable market. What we also do is, what we also very much appreciated was focus on transparency. I see it as a very important step towards circularity, and we would encourage all countries to start working with the minimal requirements given in this document. We are using these criteria also in the Netherlands, and we found out that they really work out well. Besides that, we see also the appearance of track and trace systems, which is also very helpful in the transparency. Two differences I would like to point out, since I think they are also important issues, which I missed in these GPPs. One is that we look at the carbon footprint, but we also look at the water footprint, which is also a very important environmental aspect. And another difference is that we don't really aim specifically at the use of organic cotton, but we try to, of course, we try to encourage the use of more organic cotton, since that footprint is better than non-organic cotton. But our main goal is to diminish the amount of textiles produced. So what we really do is try to stimulate the use of post-consumer textile fibers. And we see that as the optimal solution to reduce the environmental impact of textiles. Very big challenges we face at this moment, and Estella, you also mentioned it shortly in your first question, I think to Nicholas or Robert, I don't remember anymore. But sometimes it's really hard to, if you have high ambitions, there are not many companies that can apply to it. And for example, volume is a very important factor that that's very determinating for companies to offer innovative solutions. We tend to limit our contract periods also, and mostly we buy smaller amounts. So we see that this is still an obstacle for suppliers to offer these innovative or sustainable products. They simply don't offer higher solutions than the minimum we ask for, and also the number of suppliers is still a problem. Only a few suppliers are capable of offering the sustainable level we ask. So even if we would like to ask higher levels, the market simply will not offer, and this is still a problem at this moment. What we've done in the Netherlands, we have organized our public procurement in certain categories, like textiles, furniture, or ICT, etc. So what we did is that one ministry is responsible for buying these articles for all the other ministries. And this gives us the opportunity to focus on a certain product group and develop a strategy to use more sustainable products. We develop knowledge of the market and we can enlarge our volume this way. This is what we do for textiles as well. Our Ministry of Defense buys all textiles for all governmental organizations. For the market sector, this creates possibilities for innovation, since the volume of tenders can increase. This is still under development because it takes a lot of time to organize all the purchases for all our ministries. And we also tend to combine our desired articles in a package instead of products, which doesn't help if you want to create the necessary minimum volume for the market. However, the experience we have with category management as we use it this several years, we've seen that it really helps to stimulate the market to offer more sustainable products. So we are very we see it as a good way of promoting sustainability. Creating transparency for the market appears to be very helpful in realizing our ambitions. If we inform the market on time what we want and when, it gives them the opportunity to develop sustainable offers. So this is a very important factor for creating sustainable innovation, and that's what we did when we made our first moves towards asking products with a certain percentage of post-consumer textiles. For the suppliers, it wouldn't have been possible to offer this if they hadn't, because they really needed time to organize, to reorganize their process and develop new ways of production. What we also do is look at developing taking back systems. And this doesn't only help to keep textiles away from incineration and landfill, but it also creates enormous economic advantages since we create the possibility to repair items or use them for recycling. I'll tell a bit more about this further on. I would like to give some small examples of pilots where we challenged the market to offer sustainable solutions. These pilots prove that it's at this point that it is possible to offer products with post-consumer material. First, I will explain something about a pilot of our Ministry of Defense. What they did was they first organized information sessions with market parties, and we explained what we wanted and when we wanted, and that we really were focusing on aiming at getting a higher percentage of recycled content. So it was a contract where we wanted 100,000 towels and 10,000 clothes, and we asked a minimal of 10% recycled post-consumer material, and we rewarded higher percentages. The selected party offered us towels at 36% of reused post-material content, and the overalls we asked, that was another contract for 53,000. They offered us 14% of recycled post-consumer material. Besides that, we also organized a take-back system by making use, and we did that, well, the thing is, the organization of the take-back systems, that we did ourselves. We, the Ministry of Defense, actually, they used their already existing logistic network, and what they did was tendering a contract to sort the collected items. And this resulted in an offer from an organization that makes use of persons with a distance of the labor market. So this didn't only give a social benefit, but what we also saw was economic benefit was it was really high. The cost of sorting textiles costed about 1.5 million, and what we saw was that the recollected items that never had been used and could be reused, in combination with the reuse of repaired products, gave us revenues of around about 10 million euros. So this is really worth to give it a try in other organizations. I would really give this as a very positive example. All the clothes that we can't use anymore, we try to reuse them as post-material fibers. The thing is that with workwear, sometimes they are so much treated that use is more difficult. But with other products like T-shirts or blouses, you can really use this. So this really makes the collecting and reusing a very interesting business case. Another pilot that we ran in the Netherlands was organized by Rijkswaterstaat. That's the ministry. It's part of the Ministry of Infrastructure and Environment, and I work for this ministry. And in this pilot, the main question was really, can used clothing be dematerialized successfully and then be used to create new clothing? And the answer was yes, it can. What we did was really try to close the circle, close the loop of materials used. For this case, we tried a way of contracting. Namely, we did it by leasing our clothing instead of buying it. We leased clothing for our lock stewards that were, and the clothing was really designed according to the cradle-to-cradle principle. After a year, they were taken back by the owner, the supplier, and he made new clothing of it. The only problem was that the volume was not really high enough to produce a whole new line, but it did prove that it was possible to organize it this way and to close the circle of materials used. What the supplier also did was use a track and trace system. So monitor step taken into in the production process. This was also a relatively new instrument, and it worked out really well. We are 3 years later, and well, this is actually the 3rd year we are leasing these clothing, and this year we've also asked the supplier to wash and repair our clothing and only use the discarded clothing to make new fibers of it when it had reached the end of life stadium. And well, I have to say that our experiences with this pilot is also very positive, and they really show that there are several ways to organize and stimulate circularity via our purchasing powers as governments. At last, I would like to just tell you a bit more about this circular innovation, because we are still in a stadium that we are trying out if things are possible and how we can it, or how we can make a positive economic and business model with it. And there was this project. It's also a European project. It's called EGPP. It's the European Clothing Action Plan. And in this project, we're working with several European partners and organizations to work on sustainable and circular textiles. In this circle, you see the various steps that are necessary to make clothing textiles more all steps are indicated that are needed to make textiles circular. And in particular, I wanted to give attention to the fiber-to-fiber part. In this part, we are developing several pilots, and all these pilots are aimed at how post-consumer material can be reused and to make new fibers out of it and produce new products. If you're interested in what we do in the pilots, you could really look up the information on our EGP website. Because it's really, our purpose is really to develop knowledge, but also share it with everyone who can use it and who's interested in it. About the public procurement criteria, we have another work package, and that's the one I'm dealing with. In another webinar, I gave already an explanation of a report on workwear that we developed in this European Clothing Action Plan, and it really gives an overview of the market sector of workwear in Europe and the possibilities that there are to make it more sustainable and more circular. What we're also trying to do is develop new criteria to stimulate sustainability and circularity. The new criteria, the new GPP criteria we are looking at today are really helpful, and we will certainly use them in the master classes we organize about this subject. What we also would like to do is develop, well, maybe try to see if we can develop even more ambitious criteria. So everyone who would be interested in joining and helping us with that, I would also like to recall on please help us and join us in EGP, and you can find my data or on the website of EGP or at the end of this presentation. So with this, I think I've come to the end of my presentation, and Estella, if there are any questions, I would really like, well, of course I'd like to answer them.
Okay, Barbara, thank you very much for your interesting presentation and approach. I do have a couple of questions of myself, and I would like to encourage the rest of the audience to ask the questions and use the opportunity to ask Barbara any issues that you may have about the implementation, if you're thinking about replicating or potentially doing something similar. A question that I would like to ask you is about the EGP pilots. You've mentioned that, well, you're developing a few pilots, and I would like to know what kind of pilots are you developing, who are you working with, to see if this can inspire other people in the audience.
There are several companies involved in here. For example, on work, where we have a couple of companies, amongst them Schijvens, that's the Dutch company. They are developing workwear with a very high percentage of post-consumer material. They are really developing, they really reorganized their production line, started up a new fabric, and they really use old fibers, well, old textile, make new fibers of them and make new textiles of them. That's one of them. Another very interesting pilot is ACES, where they also for their male and female line, they develop new products as well with post-consumer material. And another one interesting is where we try to with sorry, I forgot the name of the company, but you can look them up at the EGP site. But in that pilot, we are testing how it can be recollected and be used as new for new products again, for new linen again.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Yes, yes, it does completely.
There's more pilots, but they're just. You can look it up at the site.
Very good. I have another question, and it's because you have been referring the volume. It's a very important issue. Of course, if you don't have enough volume, suppliers don't feel really inspired to develop something new. No, what would they even bother? So how can you, because you've mentioned a couple of things that the Dutch government is doing, but how do you think it would work? How could you overcome this? Would it be joint procurement a possibility in this field, or maybe through the use of central purchasing bodies? So what's your opinion about this?
Yes, that's a good question. And it is what we do is what we think would be a possibility is the current practice is that a part of a government asks a package where they say, well, we have, well, let's say 2,000 T-shirts and socks and some overalls, for example. So that's a package with different products, and they use it for a certain part of their organization, and that makes the volume lower than when you, for example, combine all T-shirts that should be bought by all governmental institutions. So what we're trying to do, well, we are trying to look at ways to combine the desired, well, to combine, for example, only by T-shirts, or only by overalls, or only by rain clothing. So if you combine these, it creates a much bigger volume for the market, and for them, then it's really interesting to invest in sustainable solutions. And if the volumes are too small, well, yes, it's not interesting enough for them. So that's a way to overcome this obstacle, but it asks a lot of preparation and organization, because everyone wants their own T-shirts, or kind of T-shirts and color of T-shirts, you know.
Well, it does.
So that it is a problem, but that's a way where we should go to that way of purchasing, but it's not the case yet.
Okay. Well, we'll see now. It's also been mentioned before as an issue that sometimes, of course, a joint procurement would be the best solution if everyone would buy exactly the same product. But then, of course, we would have this issue that everyone is buying the same product, wearing the same clothes, having the same gray uniform, which is also it's a different issue.
Yes, and but that's the other end of the line. I mean, there's something in the middle. There should be possibilities to give better solutions, better opportunities.
Exactly. Well, thanks a lot. We have a couple of questions from the audience. I'm not sure if it's only for you, Barbara. Might be also for Nicholas and for Robert. The first question is: does the reuse of clothing lead to higher percentage of release of microfibers during washing? She says, I heard that yeast stopped developing recycled jeans for this reason. Does anyone know about this? When you use reusing clothing, can lead to higher percentage of release of microfibers in the washing.
Your microphone was disturbing a bit, so for me the question was difficult to hear.
The question is whether the reuse of clothing, the fact that people are reusing clothing, leads to a higher release of microfibers during washing. If anyone knows about this, or do you think, well, maybe anyone from your team could be able to answer the question, that we could pass your contact to the person to the query is asking?
Nicholas or Robert, would you like to answer them, or?
We don't have any information on that. It's not something I'm aware of. I know that where you have, for example, a poorer quality recycled polyester, you've got a lot more sort of broken fiber ends, but I don't know whether that then leads to more microfibers being released.
I know the plastic fibers is a problem, so the use of the plastic bottles does pose problems in terms of microplastics in water. With the textiles, I would know, but I could look that up because there are other colleagues who have more experience in this one.
Okay.
So if the one asking this, we can answer this by email as well.
Very good. Thanks a lot for the offer. Your email address, as said, it's in the slide, so please refer to Barbara if you have any further questions. I have another question: whether the Dutch government is planning to roll out the pilot projects for textiles. Are you planning to replicate this approach, to use it again in the purchase of more textiles, Is it something that you are ongoing doing, or you've done it like one time and?
No, absolutely not the latter. No. It's absolutely our intention to continue. Well, not only continue it like pilots, but that it's becoming a normal way of purchasing. It's not on that level yet, and the market's also not ready yet. But they are. We really see the market developing itself. And yes, we will go on, and our ambitions will become higher and higher until we are there.
Okay, thank you. I think we have another question, but this one is for Nicolas. It says, well, it refers to the criteria, and it says, why is award criterion 5 on design for reuse and recycling limited only to logos and identification features, and not, for instance, zippers for recycling? Nick, I think this question you would be the right person to answer.
Okay, yes. Basically, in our background research and in discussing with various stakeholders, we focused in on this one aspect as one of the most commonly identified problems. And this is particularly in relation to them being able to pass on a garment or item of workwear for reuse. So that's why we chose this. This was identified as a common problem for being able to reuse a whole garment that's come from one particular organisation which had a very specific logo on all the run of garments. That's not to say that there wouldn't be other aspects that could be covered that might then support recycling. I think you mentioned zips that could be taken, but that was a slightly different issue, and we thought this was the most significant area to focus on it to begin with.
Thank you very much, Nick, for your answer.
Yeah.
Would like anyone to add anything to that? Okay, then I'll keep for the next question. Oh, sorry, Barbara.
No, it's what we did in the textile in the pilot with the steward for the steward clothing. That was really on the logos in it.
Okay. Barbara, are you still there? Okay, sorry, I
Yes.
thought I had lost you.
Yes.
Yes.
Do you hear me?
We have another question for you, and it says, well, if Appropriate has not yet implemented any environmental criteria in the field of textiles, what advice would you give to them to get them started? What would be your best piece of advice? Barbara, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, can you repeat your question?
The question is, if a procurer has not yet implemented any environmental criteria in the field of textiles, and they would like to get started, what piece of advice would you give to them? What would be the most important advice that you would give to them to get them started?
I think criteria with recycled content is possible to use, but use not a too high percentage. The first thing they would have to do is inform their possible suppliers that they want to develop more sustainability, that they will want to ask more sustainable products. By informing them that you want something different, always wanted. So that's just where you can start. And then this thing, consumer or organic would be apparent.
I think we haven't heard you very well. I think the connection is failing.
So, informing. You hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
The first step is try to decide what ambitions you want to put in your procurement, and then inform the market that you have these ambitions and that you want something different than they used to deliver. So that'd be the first step. And then I think the use of the criteria available by GPP or in Holland, they really offer you good facilities to use them.
Mm-hmm.
There are in fact quite and experiences could be very useful. And then beginning to organize a take-back system, that would be also a very nice step.
Okay, thank you. We have here one last question. Before I ask it, please, if you have any further questions, we've still got some minutes left, to any of the speakers of today, Robert from the European Commission, from the Environment, Nicolas from the Jane Research Center, and Barbara from the Dutch Ministry, it's the opportunity to ask. If not, I'm going to ask for the last question that we've received, and it's, wait a second, how did you verify the recycled content in the contracts? One thing is asking for an verify. One thing is asking for an amount of recycled content, but how can you actually verify that this is true? Yes. That the supplier is actually delivering what it's supposed to be delivering in terms of the recycled content?
I wouldn't. I'm not who has contracted it. So they have run tests, and they have asked the suppliers to show their system of how they have reused the how they compost materials. And what they also do is simply visit the plants where the products are produced, to look if it's real, if it's possible, everything like that.
Ah, very good. Okay, then thanks a lot, Barbara. I think that's pretty much it. If there are no further questions, I think we can close the webinar. I would like to thank all of our speakers today for the presentations and for sharing your knowledge. It's always very, very helpful for all people practicing and working in the field. And to all participants, thanks for staying with us at the webinar. I just want to remember you that the webinar has been recorded and will be uploaded to the GPP Helpdesk website from the environment. So in case now you would like to remember any of the discussions had in the webinar, or you would like to share it with any colleagues, just please feel free. And well, I hope that you enjoyed the webinar and you found it useful. And I hope that you found some inspiration for your daily practice. And we look forward to seeing you around next time. Bye, everyone, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Estella, for facilitating this, for giving the opportunity. It was really nice.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Estella.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for the participants.